Hi, my name is Charny Beck, and I am the Regional Director at Stitch Ministries Houston Family Counseling. I have been married to a pastor church planner for 25 years. I've been a therapist for 25 years and 6 years at Stitch Ministries. Much of my work is with women, couples, infidelity recovery, depression, and much of my caseload is made up of pastors and wives, ministry leaders, and missionary couples. I have sat with ministry leaders in dark places. Our journey started 13 years ago when God called us to plant a church. I watched Randy become invigorated with excitement. He couldn't read enough, and God had given him a passion and calling for something new. God had birthed an idea, a dream in Randy, and we were ready for the journey. There is an indescribable deep burden for church planters when it is something that you birthed and developed from the ground up. There are blurred lines between God's calling and the deep responsibility for the church being successful. The challenge is success in a church is a moving target. Fast forward 10 years, I could see and feel the heaviness of the burden that Randy was carrying. I knew the burden came with the territory, but sometimes the weight can be too much. I walked into church one Sunday morning about 4 months before the crash. I remember looking around and God preparing me for what was to come. It was a moment in time, but it was a turning point and a wake-up call between the Lord and me. What led to the crash? Cordero talks about 3 things happening to lead up to burnout in terms of the crash. After 10 years of doing ministry alongside his good friend decided that it was best for their family to move on and not be at the church anymore. That was on a Tuesday. The next Monday, Randy found out one of his dearest friends and one of the elders in our church had been having a 2-year-long affair with another prominent member of the community. Strike 2. That Sunday, a newer couple in our church called Randy into a meeting and began to make some hurtful accusation about Randy's character in the name of trying to help. That was strike 3. It wasn't a moment in time, but I knew we were on a new road and a new season of suffering. The love of my life was struggling greatly. As we started on this new road, because of my background as a counselor, I knew what the road was ahead. As we began to walk this road of suffering, my prayer with the Lord was, if we must walk down this road, let's do it well. That was the achiever in me. Randy and I started taking walks as much as I could convince him it was a good idea. One walk in our neighborhood, I remember exactly where we were on the road. I verbalized some hard things. I was worried about him, and I suggested that he may be struggling with some depression. I knew it, he just didn't know it yet. I made a conscious effort to draw the circle in closer in terms of who was able to get to Randy. I wanted to create a safe place at home for him to rest, to think of it, to spend time with the Lord, and just to learn to be. No talk about church, just love, encouragement, and space. Our church culture and in the minds of our pastors, burnout is acceptable, but depression is a difficult pill to swallow. Depression is what other people struggle with. My faith should be stronger than that. If I was a good leader, I wouldn't be struggling with this. I am more broken than I thought. I just need to trust God more. Something's wrong with me. It must be a lack of faith on my part. If I talk about it, I may be disqualified from ministry, and ministry is all I know. Depression moved into our home and brought a new season to our marriage. As a therapist, I understood depression to be situational for Randy. I encouraged him to get on some medication for a short amount of time to help in the healing process. I also encouraged him to go to talk to a counselor that could help him sort out the hurt. Randy's fear was he now had this deep clinical depression, and this means I am never going to be better, and I'm always going to feel this way. I describe depression like you feel like you have fallen down a deep, dark hole, and it's cold and lonely and hopeless at times, and I'm not sure how I can get out of this hole. No one understands the dark thoughts. Randy describes his depression as he was stuck in a chair that was shackled to a leadership table. People come and go from the table, all with expectations of him. They sit at the table, share their expertise on how they think he can be doing it better, and then leave him stuck at the table. He truly believed he couldn't leave the table. Descriptive words if you are in a hole or stuck at the table: heaviness, smothering, alone, isolated, tearful, uncontrolled emotions, undone. 3 takeaways from this chapter. Long-term stress. Cordero talks about an adrenaline addiction as an emotional suicide that will slowly progress and may be difficult to detect. That adrenaline rush started for Randy back in 2008 when God put a holy discontentedness in his heart for something new. The adrenaline itself is not bad, but over time, not measured, can be destructive. I think a lot of us have felt this adrenaline addiction over COVID, depending on the work that we do. We were forced to think outside the box, come up with something new, do things totally different, reinvent our calling, and that takes a lot of adrenaline. 40% of Americans are changing jobs and careers as we speak, and I think the adrenaline is worn off. Long-term stress slowly takes its toll one day at a time. We get used to the rhythm of the stress. What does long-term stress look like as a pastor? Another inspiring message week after week. It's like finding out you're pregnant on Monday, giving birth on Sunday through this sermon to find out you're pregnant on Monday morning, week after week. Another meeting with another member who needs more, demands more, and maybe has more brokenness than one man can handle. The pressure of coming up with a new idea on how to grow the church, coming up with a new program on how to disciple people better, or a new idea on how to serve the community more. It's never enough. Pastors spend much of their career grieving losses that they may not have realized were even losses to begin with. When a church planter pours his life into a family and the church plant is small and the family decides it isn't for them anymore, it is an abandoning feeling for pastors. That pastor loved that family well and ministered to them deeply, and then the family leaves. Huge loss and a feeling of abandonment. When families leave, pastors hurt. There is a fine line between feeling like they are leaving the church and feeling like they are leaving the pastor. A few takeaways if you identify with our story. If you think you might be struggling with burnout and depression, how much longer do you think you can continue leading in this condition? Are you masking your symptoms of burnout and depression? And if so, who can you call and ask for help? Cordero says it takes 3 to 5 years to recover from a burnout crash. We are 3 years and 3 months into our recovery from the crash. In some ways, we're in such a better place. God has been so gracious to us. God has opened the door for our little church plant to merge with another little church plant, and Randy once again has a partner in ministry and doesn't have to do it alone. These pastors take turns preaching and carrying the burden of ministry together. What an incredible blessing for us. Everyone's blessing looks a little different on the other side. In terms of recovery and practice, the weeks are so much healthier, but the symptoms are now a permanent fixture in our home that he and I are always aware of. That's the reality of burnout. Once it enters your life, it's always there lingering. I love how Lou Giglio describes the anxiety and depression that comes with burnout. Sometimes it is a mile away, sometimes it's around the corner and you feel it, and sometimes it pops up right next to you as you are sitting at the leadership table. One of the things that I notice between the difference between a therapist and a pastor, especially men being pastors, is when they sit with people with this heavy burden and you're sitting in this dark place. Sometimes I describe it as I picture myself climbing into the valley of the shadow of death with people, and I'm sitting in it with them. The difference is I will climb out after the session. And I think that's a gift that God gives therapists that do this long term, because if not, you get stuck down there. I think for pastors and men possibly is that there's this idea that they need to fix it, that it's their burden to fix whatever problem somebody brings. And there's a lot of problems, a lot of challenges for people that aren't fixable. And they may not even need you to fix it. They just want somebody to sit with them in the darkness. And so I think for me, knowing what it was like, knowing what I walked through with him, I think I bring that with me to the counseling room, that sometimes it takes time and you just need someone to sit there with you through it. And I think for Randy, it was really night and day in terms of even preaching after he walked through. Even in the healing process, there's a little bit more of a rawness and an emotional challenge to people that I see in his preaching specifically after the burnout. Counseling can be a benefit to everyone at different stages, different seasons of life, and you want to find a good Christian counselor to sit with you through this. And one of the ways I would suggest is Stitch Ministries. There's a counseling office here in San Antonio. You can give them a call and they can help connect you with a therapist, or ask your pastor if they have any referrals to counselors that they trust and that they think would be helpful. Just find a solid Christian therapist that can be able to walk through this with you.